Let's take a look back at some of the best stories of the year with a special edition of EarthxNews. First up, we'll speak with our founder, Trammell S. Then, you'll hear about how war impacts not only the environment, but the people who live there. And Beauty and Brains, how One Miss America is looking ahead towards sustainable fuel in the future. Hello and welcome to EarthxNews, where we focus on sustainability and the environment. I'm your host, Christina Thompson. And as we look forward to the new year, we first want to take a look back at 2023 and some of the stories we've covered here on EarthxNews. That's right, it's a special edition episode. First, an intro into EarthX, who we are, what we do. EarthX is an international environmental nonprofit connecting a global community to create a sustainable world for all life and future generations. We take a look back at our opening intro with our founder, Trammell S. As he explains, we only get one Earth, so we need to take care of it.
Well, when I was a kid, I learned to believe in the environment at an early age. And when I was a kid, one didn't think about having a career that did good as well as did well. The mentality was, when I reach the end of my days and retire, then I can start doing good. So environment was always the goal for me. I said, what the heck? Earth Day's in 5 months. Let's just have an Earth Day. And so it turned out really to be a great move, because Earth Days aren't held so much anymore. So we've become the biggest one.
What made you fall in love with the environment, even as a kid?
Growing up in the 60s, or on the cover of Saturday Evening Post, there'd be a river on fire,
Wow.
or a forest fire, or some remarkable example of environmental injustice, and we had never seen it before. People had never been made aware of environmental degradation, of possible species endangerment. So I think it hit a lot of us.
And suddenly EarthX grew to something much bigger. What was that like? How did that growth happen?
What we have done has been more multidimensional, more inclusive, and more topics and subjects than, I believe, any other environmental event. We just don't get hung up on climate all the time.
Right.
Although we might all get hung up on climate someday. So EarthX was the only way we could try to make a symbol that could include it all. Fill in the blank.
Something that you say that I think is great is we welcome all viewpoints. You know, that dialogue is very important. I think that a lot of us have lost even just the ability to sit across from someone and talk to someone who might have a different belief from us and be able to hold any form of a civil conversation. So how do you kind of pair the two, making sure that we reach the collective goal of sustaining our environment while still listening to people who might have a whole realm of different viewpoints?
You know, different viewpoints doesn't mean for and against. And it doesn't mean necessarily denial, but to have the diversity of topic and opinion, but again, not so much for and against as how do you crack the nut? We're all heading towards the same goal.
Right.
We just don't know it yet.
And everyone's goal should be able to continue living on a planet that it's the only one we've known.
Yeah, there's only one of them.
Only one of them, which also brings me to the marble. You brought in these marbles and you gave it to us and you said, there's only one of these, take care of it. How did this become your thing?
The blue marble. There's only one of them. We have it in our hand like it's something so small and insignificant and replaceable. But stop, there's only one of those. Save the world, species, ocean, soil, environment, conservation. Climate is an overarching issue. Really, one of our missions is to bring people together, and environmentalists and conservationists together, politicians, private property owners, NGOs. So how can you put all that into a mission statement?
That must be tough to work with different leaders and nations across the globe.
Well, you cannot avoid the problems. The environment knows no borders, right? And it is difficult. Getting the attention of the governments is not hard. And all the little islands spread through the South Pacific, they are painfully aware of their threat. How would you like to be on a little island looking at a horizon like this, knowing that it's rising inexorably, and you're sitting there? So it doesn't matter how easy it is, it's compelling. This is the blue marble. There's more blue than there is green. There's too much brown encroaching, and there's too much white melting. The world is fragile. The atmosphere is so tiny and so precious that we must preserve it.
Next, let's look back on a developing story we've been following, the increase in whale deaths in the Northeast Atlantic. What's causing it, and can it be stopped? Lisa Lenoz with the Energy and Wildlife Coalition and Regina Asmudas Silvia, senior biologist of the Whale and Dolphin Conservation, discuss. To avoid the worst impacts of climate change, emissions need to be reduced by almost half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Regardless of the source, the energy requirements of the planet are increasing and will need to be met somehow. One of the tools providing a clean energy solution is wind turbines. But regardless of the green energy development, some environmentalists are not on board. They oppose the project because of debates over offshore wind farms' impacts on whales in the region. Whale strandings in the Northeast are not new, but they are happening more and more often. The first offshore wind turbine in the Northeast began operating in 2016, when the whale death uptick started. Here with me to share her findings and hypothesis, the co-chair for the Wildlife for the Energy and Community Coalition and the founder of Save Right Whales Coalition, Lisa Lenoz. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we get into what's happening to the whales, I first wanted to ask you, do you think that wind energy has a place in our energy plans, and should it be utilized in the right conditions?
That's a big question. Wind energy, in a large respect, is an ancillary source of generation simply because it's entirely reliant on the weather. So we cannot run the United States economy on wind or solar and renewables in general. So it has a place, but not as large as what the public has been led to believe.
Okay. And I know that you recently worked on a documentary. It argues that wind turbines could be behind the whale deaths. Can you explain what you guys found?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not the wind turbines yet. We only have about 7 operating turbines in the United States right now, but it's the pre-construction work that is happening offshore, where they're conducting sonar surveys to identify the subsurface, what the land is under the water, in preparation for development. And it's that process that we believe is causing the whales to die.
So there's a huge debate about this right now in the media. We know the federal government, the wind farm companies, a lot of scientists, they've said that they definitively can't point to the turbines as the whale killer culprit. NOAA sent out a statement saying that the wind farms certainly are affecting the whales, but not killing them. I know you were just saying that it's not the wind farms yet. Why do you think that it could get potentially worse for whales?
Oh, because what's happening right now is that this precursor is a small piece of what we're going to have when the projects are actually operational. The level of noise that is being produced in the water at this point is significant. And what we did in our investigations, we actually had a 2-pronged investigation. And we found both temporal and spatial correlation between the whale deaths and the activity within the wind-lease areas, meaning that at the same time and at roughly the same place, the whales were dying when the boats were active. Then we went back further and we looked at the noise itself. We had an acoustician went out there and actually measured the noise levels. And what we found was shocking. And that, we believe, is what's killing the whales. The noise is enormous. It's not being mitigated properly, and the whales are getting too close to the sound.
Interesting. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your report and your findings. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next guest is pointing to a different culprit behind the whale deaths: climate change and shipping lanes. Regina Asmudas-Silvia, the executive director at Whale and Dolphin Conservation in North America. Regina, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your expertise. I wanted to ask, in your opinion, what is causing these whale deaths?
Based on the information that's available, based on the ability to do the necropsies and the examinations, most of the animals that have been examined have evidence of vessel strikes. We've seen a number of species that have had a change in distribution as a result of a change in climate and changing prey bases, where they're going to go look for food, where they're finding food. There's been some fishery management changes that have led to an increase in abundance of menhaden, the small schooling fish, particularly in the mid-Atlantic and the New York Bight area. And we don't know how whales find their food, but they're good at it. So there have been an increase in the number of whales going into that area looking for food. There is an increase in activity. It's not a place that we would have probably had management measures previously because that area wasn't considered to be a high use area for a lot of different whale species in the past. And so seeing more whale watching happening in that area regularly was another indication of the fact that whales are being sighted there on a more consistent basis. And more whales in an area, particularly in a place that has a lot of boat traffic, is unfortunately going to lead to issues where you're going to have vessel strikes.
Obviously, a lot goes into this, but we do appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. Regina Asmudas-Silvia, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, war and the environment. We will all feel the lasting impacts from conflicts overseas for years to come. So how can we mitigate those impacts?
But quite honestly, this isn't a politically attractive subject for anyone after the war is over. So you don't see the UN standing up and saying, how are we all going to contribute to a global fund for war cleanup? So to your point, there is no centralized place. It's not in our psyche as a process that, oh my gosh, we've been to war, it was horrific, but we've got work to do now.
War and the environment. It's a difficult topic to discuss, but one that's important, as recent overseas conflicts, like those in Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Israel, will have lasting consequences for both the environment and the people who live there. Militaries consume enormous amounts of fossil fuels. Bombing directly harms wildlife and biodiversity. Pollution from war contaminates bodies of water, soil, and air. We could go on and on about the greenhouse gas emissions that warfare releases. Let's take a look back at my conversation with retired Air Force Brigadier General Blaine Holt. General Holt, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, what are the impacts of war on nature and the environment?
You know, Christina, this is such an important topic. The effects are infinite. And we always look at getting to the peace place or conflict resolution, but that's when real work starts to begin, because there are so many people that have died from the environmental effects after the war is long gone and done. And it can be things that are so glaring and obvious, like chemicals that have been burst into the ground, or it could be depleted uranium shells that have created a radioactivity problem. But there's other effects that don't so easily get measured. If you remember the fall of the Soviet Union, half the wild boar population was gone because there was no economy, nobody could feed themselves, and they went out and just started exterminating every single wild boar that they had. If you go to Africa, we see 90% of the herbivores that are in the midsection of Africa depleted simply because the war factions either kill their environment or they kill them for food. It just goes on and on for trenches. And so if the world's going to get together at the UN level or a multinational level, it really ought to be, what are we going to do about how we damage the environment once the war is over? How do we get at the best remediation that we possibly can?
Obviously, we do want to be very clear that human life lost is the greatest tragedy of war. In no means are we trying to diminish that pain and suffering of those who are truly enduring the horrors of war currently. But do you think the effects on the environment are often ignored? I mean, the Earth and everyone on it, as we've been saying, will suffer for years to come as a result of these conflicts that are even thousands and thousands of miles away from home.
No, that's exactly right. The ecosystem gets damaged when we have these big wars. And then, God forbid that we would ever have a full up nuclear exchange. We understand where that goes, and likely it goes to the ultimate bad place. But what we don't do is we never account for the true costs of war. And what I love about your show is that you're examining a significant cost imposition to humanity from having these wars. It doesn't mean we can eliminate the wars, but it does mean that we ought to calculate what is that damage going to be going forward, and how do we address it?
Absolutely. Very true. Brigadier General Blaine Holt, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your expertise.
Great to be with you.
And this next woman, she can do it all. Current Miss America, a scientist and an advocate for promoting nuclear energy as a sustainable alternative. Please enjoy my conversation with Grace Stanke. Grace, thank you so much for taking your time today. I know that you know so much about nuclear. It is, I guess, your expertise. So I kind of want you to break down for me, is nuclear energy the future of sustainable energy?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. Second of all, it certainly is. One thing that I think is not included enough in the discussion as we move into this zero carbon energy world is we also need reliable energy. And there's only two things that fit the bill when it comes to reliable and zero carbon, and that's hydroelectric and nuclear. And when it comes to living in a sustainable society with energy and with the electricity that we use every single day all around us, we're going to need to make sure that it is always available. And nuclear is one of the most reliable forms of energy production that we have in today's world.
So discuss some of the work that you've been involved in with nuclear energy.
Yes, I have worked for the nation's largest nuclear fleet. So it's a company that owns and operates 12 different nuclear power plants across the country. But then when I stepped into the role of Miss America, I turned into this advocacy position, which I have truly, truly loved.
Are there any cons to nuclear energy?
Well, right now, I would say the biggest con is it's expensive to build right now. And that is because of a lot of different sort of political climate things at the moment. It is a major, major investment for people to build new nuclear at this time. But the thing is we live in America, right? So people tend to look at a short-term investment, but nuclear is a long-term investment. You build one of these nuclear power plants. We're seeing power plants that were built in the 70s. They're going for their 80-year extension, meaning they've been providing clean electricity and reliable electricity to Americans for 80 years. There aren't many types of other power that can say that they've been doing that for 80 years with just one nuclear power plant, right? And that's something that is really, really incredible. So nuclear is worth that long-term investment because we need to take that long-term investment to keep this planet livable.
All right, Grace Stanke, current Miss America, nuclear expert. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Mike Brennan. He will give us a first-hand look at some of the technology aimed at improving predictions and the brave storm chasers who risk their safety to save yours during massive storms. Stay right here. EarthX News will be right back. Hurricanes are a scary force for anyone living near a coast. And in recent years, scientists have begun to notice patterns of them getting more powerful and more unpredictable. So how can we improve severe weather predictions in a climate-altered world? Hurricane hunter and NOAA scientist Dr. Mike Brennan tells us. Dr. Brennan, thank you so much for coming on today for the show. We really appreciate it. I wanted to talk to you about something that NOAA is doing that's really incredible. It's cutting edge in the world of hurricane tracking. You are literally flying headfirst into storms to collect data. How do you do this?
Well, we have great partners from the NOAA or hurricane hunters. They fly aircraft directly into the eye of the storm, and they give us direct information here at the National Hurricane Center about where the storm is located, how strong the storm is in terms of its peak winds, and how big the storm is. And our forecasters here use all that information to help analyze the storm and improve our forecast of where the storm's going to go, how big it's going to be, what the hazards are going to be like in terms of storm surge, wind, and heavy rainfall. So it's a really vital thing that they do, and they're really the only direct measurements we can get of some of those parameters of the storm.
So what exactly is a hurricane hunting aircraft?
Well, there are a variety. Right now, NOAA has two P3 Orion hurricane hunters that you're looking at now. They're propeller aircraft, and they fly sort of low altitude missions into a hurricane, flying at about 8,000 to 10,000 feet to collect data on the structure of the storm. They have a tail Doppler radar on board that can measure the precipitation and the wind information around the storm. NOAA also has a high altitude Gulfstream 4 jet that flies out up at 45, 50,000 feet near and around the storm and drops dropsondes that measure temperature and wind and moisture through the depth of the atmosphere all the way down to the ocean surface. And that data gets used by the numerical models that help our forecasters make the forecasts and issue the watches and warnings for hurricanes here.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, how is that data then used to be able to help lives, to save lives? I believe this is some fairly new technology that you guys are working with, right?
Well, the data has always been used for many, many years by forecasters here at the National Hurricane Center for their own analysis to understand what's going on in the storm. But what's changed in the last 5 to 10 years, especially, is all the data coming from all the Hurricane Hunter aircraft are going into the numerical weather forecast models that we use to make track and intensity and size forecasts. And they tend to improve the track and intensity forecast by about 10 to 20%. So that can mean the difference between evacuating a community and not evacuating a community, or better understanding the threat from storm surge, wind, and heavy rainfall to help people better prepare for a storm.
Are there any tangible benefits, any exact moments in time where there was a storm that maybe hit, where you guys have been able to do something in real time to save people that you can look back on and say, that's because of our missions, that's because of our efforts?
Well, I think, anytime a storm is rapidly intensifying, I think that's the situation where having the aircraft in there is one of the most beneficial times to have that, because the storm's changing very rapidly. And we can see that happening on satellite imagery. But that only gives us an estimate of how strong the storm is. So when a storm's really changing quickly, having the aircraft directly measuring the data in the aircraft can allow us to make changes to the types of watches and warnings we have out, can update the forecast for storm surge, which is the potential hazard that has the potential to kill the most people in tropical storms and hurricanes in this country, and get that information out to people very quickly.
I mean, this is so important, especially now. I know this past summer we had some of the strongest storms, strongest hurricanes we've ever seen. You guys are saving lives, so we really appreciate all that you're doing for the planet.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Christina Thompson.